Yo, what's going on YouTube? It is your boy GZTV. If I get interrupted, it's fine. My dad's off work today. He's been doing stuff around the house. So if I have to end the video a couple of times, that's okay. But we are here to finally cover a classic horror film. This is essential for all horror fans to watch, and I can't believe I'm waiting until now to watch it. We have the 1978 American independent slasher film, directed, co-written, and scored by John Carpenter, legendary horror film director. We have Halloween. We have the original. We've watched like Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends and a bunch of those other films on the channel, but we have never really gotten to watch the original on the channel. Back when I was a little younger, my cousin was like a really big fan of horror films, so I think this was almost like destined for me to start watching horror films. But back in the day, we used to watch this movie all the time, but I've never really gotten a chance to rewatch it as an older person and like cover it on the YouTube channel. So we're gonna get into the plot. We're gonna get into like the modern day critical reception. I don't really like to talk about what people think, what people thought back in the day. I want to talk about now because we need a modern take on this thing. So let's get into it. So the plot takes place on Halloween night 1963 in the suburban town of Haddonfield, Illinois, which is crazy because I live in Illinois. I'm not sure how far Haddonfield is from here. I know it is a real place. Where 6-year-old Michael Myers brutally stabs his teenage sister Judith to death with a kitchen knife. And this is just like the villain origin story of Michael Myers in the Halloween franchise. So, 15 years later, his psychiatrist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, drives with a colleague, Nurse Marion Chambers, to the sanitarium where Michael is incarcerated to escort him to a court hearing. So he's been kept there for years. Obviously, he's pretty much like pledged insanity. Like, no normal 6-year-old is out here stabbing their sister. So yeah, he's obviously like a mental patient, which obviously sets up for a really cool story as well. There's a lot of aspects that are very likable for this show, and obviously people have mimicked it over time, so now it kind of looks unoriginal. But after Loomis exits their car to unlock the main gate, Michael jumps on the roof and attacks Marion. And she runs from the vehicle, allowing Michael to steal the car and drive off. So now there's a problem. A mental patient has sprung loose from the sanitarium. And it's crazy because right now he's not really a spirit, where he's kind of known in the Halloween films as being like a spirit of a escaped mental patient, but in the original film, like, he is actually just like a mental patient that escapes, and that gives it a more surreal feel to it. And this is something that could literally happen. So Michael makes his way back to Haddonfield, killing a mechanic for his coveralls on the way and stealing a white mask from a local hardware store. So it's really cool how he kind of gets his mask and all that, his whole costume, his whole look that has been iconic for so many years. It's so funny and creative how they kind of gave him that. So who would have thought a random white mask that some random person created would become this, I guess. in the film world, obviously, in the world of this movie. So he begins stalking teenager Laurie Strode, who is played by the amazing Jamie Lee Curtis, who is an absolute staple to this franchise, whom he saw drop off a key at his long-abandoned childhood home that her father is trying to sell, and maybe he's like taking offense to her like being on his old property. I don't know why he's doing this, but again, it just makes the movie. So Laurie notices Michael throughout the day, but her friends Annie Brackett and Linda Vanderklok dismiss her concerns. They think she's like going crazy, losing it. She needs to go out and have some fun, or else. Sorry about the laundry room in the background, by the way. She needs to go have some fun for once in her life to kind of relieve these weird visions and whatnot she's having. So Loomis arrives in Haddonfield and discovers that Michael has stolen Judith's tombstone from the local cemetery. So they go to look, they're trying to look for Michael Myers' grave. Well, no, not my, fuck, what am I saying? They're trying to look for Judith Myers' grave, and they're like looking at the plots, and like, yeah, that's supposed to be her plot. He takes the tombstone. That's the sister he killed, obviously, so he has some sort of resentment for her, obviously. I mean, maybe he did it for the thrill, maybe he was naive at the time. But yeah. So he meets up with Annie's father, Sheriff Leigh Brackett, and they begin to search for Michael. Again, this is super dangerous. This is a mental patient that is on the run. He killed someone years prior, and like as a mature adult, who knows what he's going to do next. So While they investigate the old Myers house, Loomis describes how he came to realize that Michael is just pure evil. It's like at a point, I'm sure people thought, well, this is just a little kid, like he's innocent. But no, he starts to realize like this is actually an evil person. So that night, Michael follows Annie and Lori to their babysitting jobs. They're babysitting on Halloween. Lori watches Tommy Doyle while Annie stays with Lindsay Wallace across the street. So Michael spies on Annie and kills the Wallace family dog. So she's kind of the first person that he is targeting in his whole stalking scheme over the night of Halloween. Tommy spots Michael from the windows and thinks he is the boogeyman, but Lori dismisses him. How crazy is that? Tommy went to school that day and all of his friends were like, beware the boogeyman, it's Halloween. Like, just trying to bring up this legend. And he was getting genuinely scared. But yeah, there's a boogeyman in town right now, like a real one. So Lori's like, meh, I don't believe you. It's just that classic horror movie trope. So later, Annie takes Lindsay to the Doyle house for the night so she can pick up her boyfriend and they can have a fun time and enjoy Halloween. Obviously, Lori has nothing else to do, which is kind of a dickhead thing to do. Is a friend to like send your responsibility off to her. But yeah, let me see. So Michael hides in her car and kills Annie by slashing her throat. So she's the first one that dies in this film. It actually takes a decent amount of time for a first kill to happen. There's this mysterious looming, and the movie does a pretty good job of building suspense. So Linda and her boyfriend Bob arrive at the Wallace house and find it empty. So after having sex, Bob goes downstairs for a beer where Michael pins him to the wall with a kitchen knife and kills him as well. Michael then poses as Bob in a ghost costume and confronts Linda, who teases him to no effect. She's like, sorry, what the fuck? I just flicked my mic for no reason. He's like, Michael's trying to like play a joke and like make her think it's like an innocent situation, but there's actually a serial killer behind this mask. So annoyed, she calls Lori to find out what happened to Annie, but Michael strangles her to death with the phone cord while Lori listens on the other end. I mean, what an iconic kill, the phone cord kill. Meanwhile, Loomis discovers the stolen car and searches the streets. So yeah, now Annie has died, Bob has died, and Linda has died. So Lori is pretty much like the final girl. We're obviously setting that up, and that's why, again, Jamie Lee Curtis is so iconic to this franchise, because she was the final girl of the original movie. Like, how could you deny her in this franchise? So yeah, Loomis sees this car around, and he's like looking around, can't quite find him. So, worried by the phone call, Lori goes to the Wallace house and finds her friends' bodies, as well as Judith's headstone and the upstairs bedroom, and this is obviously Michael Myers trying to send a message. She runs to the hallway where Michael slashes her arm, causing her to fall over the banister, and this is kind of where the third act starts, and you have this ensuing pursuit with Michael Myers and Lori. So, dazed and injured, Lori manages to escape the house with Michael in pursuit. Lori makes it back to the Doyle house, but realizes she lost the keys to the front door and it is locked. Tommy lets her in, and she orders him and Lindsay to hide. The boogeyman has come. Tommy's bullies at school manifested it, I guess. So Lori tries to call for help, only to find the phone is dead. Michael sneaks in through the window and attacks her again, but she stabs him in the neck with a knitting needle, kind of like putting him out for a little bit. So, thinking Michael is dead, Lori staggers upstairs to check on the children, where Michael appears again. So, now we're kind of getting the feeling that this is like a superhuman entity and not just a normal mental patient, but it's a part of the movie. I mean, he gets killed in this franchise and then reemerges as a ghost, pretty much. But, yeah. When Tommy and Lindsay hide in the bathroom, Lori hides in the bedroom closet. She realizes they are not going to be able to fight this thing off. Lori stabs him in the eye with a coat hanger and then in the chest with his own knife, which he drops from being distracted with the coat hanger. After she sends Tommy and Lindsay to a neighbor's house to call the police, Michael rises again. I mean, at some point in this film, they do try a little hard to, have drama effects to it, but, yeah. Seeing the children running from the house, Loomis goes to investigate and sees Michael strangling Lori, so he ends up saving the day, taking responsibility for his own patient for once. She breaks free by pulling his mask off, revealing his face as this really weird, distorted. I don't know what happened to him. Obviously, I think they kind of explain it throughout the rest of the franchise. But Loomis I'm not super familiar with. Like, I know there's a lot of, this is like a cult classic. This has a cult following, and I know the fans are going to be attacking me in the comments for not knowing everything about this movie. But yeah, just give me a break, guys. So Loomis shoots Michael, knocking him off the balcony. When he goes to check on the body, Loomis sees that Michael has vanished. Unsurprised, he stares off into the night as Laurie sobs in terror, realizing that Michael is not dead and he is going to continue to terrorize this area, obviously setting up for an entire franchise. And the rest is history for this, because this is one of the most popular, most iconic, probably most well done, if I'm being honest, franchise ever. But yeah, it definitely has its faults throughout it. If you guys want me to watch any more of the movies throughout the franchise, let me know. But I am going to be getting into kind of what people say today about the film rather than like the contemporaries. You know what, for the review, we can make this a big video. I think a movie of this caliber deserves a long video. But I think we can talk about both views. So, like, talking about what people thought about the movie when it first came out. It had very well performance. It wasn't very marketed at the time. There's a lot of word of mouth. Some people dismissed the film at first, which is crazy. Carpenter doesn't seem to have had any life outside the movies. One can trace almost every idea on the screen to directors such as Hitchcock and Brian De Palma, and to the Val Lewton productions. Maybe when a horror film is stripped of everything but dumb scariness, when it isn't ashamed to revive the stalest device of the game genre, the escaped lunatic, it satisfies part of the audience in a more basic, childish way that sophisticated horror pictures do. So yeah, it's good. Like, when it first came out, I think people really like it, and still to this day it holds up as a pretty good horror film. There are definitely some cheap thrills, there are definitely some like very surface level things going on, but it's well made. It's sometimes empty and morbid, but yeah, it was pretty good though. I mean, taken on its own level, Halloween is a terrifying movie for its time. If you were the right age and right mood for it, it's a burgeoning cult film at the time of its release. It's moody in the extreme. The direction, the score especially. I think the music, the soundtrack, whatever you want to call it, is probably the best. Like, of a lot of horror movies, it beats out a lot of them. So it's a beautifully made thriller that works because Carpenter, the director, knows how to shock while making us smile. He repeatedly sets up anticipation of a shock and delays the shock for varying lengths of time. Obviously playing tricks on the fans and having fun with his own movie. The tension is considerable. More than once during the movie I looked around just to make sure that no one weird was sitting behind me. This is true. I'm reading some critics right now, and this is actually true. Like, I genuinely did this when I was watching the movie. Not even joking. Since there's precious little character or plot development to pass the time between the stalking sequences, one tends to wish the killer would get on with it sometimes. This movie does carry on. Like, for an hour and a half, I feel like it is a little bloated. But presumably, Carpenter imagines he's building up spine-tingling anticipation, but his techniques are so transparent and laborious that the result is attenuation rather than tension, I guess. So, it's tediously familiar. Only notable element is Jamie Lee Curtis, whose performance as the intended fourth victim is well above the rest of the film. She is like a huge part of this film's success. It's sociologically irrelevant, but its hitch-like techniques are great and effective. The most honest way to make a good schlock film. There's a lot of Psycho, Night of the Living Dead type of similarities we see, and the style of it. It's good. The film bids fair to become the cult discovery of 1978. Audiences have been heard screaming at its horrifying climaxes. It's a visceral experience. We aren't seeing the movie, we're having it happen to us. It's frightening. Maybe you don't like movies that are really scary, then don't see this one. This is genuinely scary sometimes. They do a good job. Like, we are talking about a movie that came out in the 70s, too. It's one of the better films of its time, for sure. Carpenter's choice of camera angles, simple music, the lack of blood and graphic violence was a lot of talking points for this. Now, looking back on it, it is still one of the best films of its time. Like, no doubt about it. I think it's really good. I would give it a B to A rating. I think it is good. It definitely holds itself up as a horror classic. I think you guys should watch it if you haven't. I'm sorry if I'm talking so much. It's scary, suspenseful, and viscerally thrilling. Halloween set the standard for modern horror films for sure. Like, if you don't like this movie, I just don't know what to say. Like, you don't like horror movies. There's some pretty silly and groundless things that people said back in the day. I was just kind of citing people and quoting them. Some critics in the late 1980s and early 1990s blamed the film for spawning the slasher subgenre, which they felt had rapidly descended into sadism and misogyny, I guess. I don't know. The recurring descriptions of Halloween as overtly violent or gory is so dumb. The film is, in fact, one of the most restrained horror films. I mean, very little on-screen violence, which a lot of horror films can't restrain from doing. The first-person camera shots that earlier film reviewers had praised were kind of iffy later on. Slasher film directors used these for their own film, like Friday the 13th. It encouraged audience identification with the killer. The way the camera moves in on the screaming, pleading victim, looks down at the knife, and then points it into the chest, ear, or eyeball. Now that's like dope. Like, there's a lot of really dope things that other horror films have adopted from this. I'm sorry if I talk so much. This is going to be a long video. I think it deserves it, though. I think this is a cult classic. Again, a B to A movie for sure. I'm not going to give it like an A rating. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it's stood the test of time to this day. On Halloween night, there are definitely people out there that still watch this movie. So yeah, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Again, if you guys want me to check more out of this franchise, and if you guys have any more movie suggestions that we haven't got to on this channel, please let me know. I'm running out of movies on my Scratch It poster, but yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll probably start watching a bunch of action movies as well, so that'll be exciting. But yeah, peace out, guys.